with a brief introduction, I think, from each of our panellists. So, Chris, if I can start with you, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Uren. I work for Telefonica Tech. I head up the public sector area in data and AI. So my day job, and it has been for the last 7-8 years, is working with organisations who have vast amounts of data on how they could use and get value from that data, and more increasingly so now how they can use AI, the opportunities that AI provide to them to become more efficient, generate better decisions, or look at what may happen in the future.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Naomi Moore, and I work for Teamwork IMS, who are an ISO management system consultancy business. So we support clients in terms of obtaining certification and maintaining certification. And I have a background in information security, data protection, delivery of ISO certification programs, and helping clients maintain those. And I now lead the sales team, and we have a wealth of clients who have a lot of interest in the new AI standard.
Yes, hello. I'm Ludo Breeman from Kiwa Global IT. Nice to be here. I'm involved in the global applications Kiwa has and aims to roll out across the different countries, and also in innovation. AI, I really don't consider myself as an AI expert, so that's not the reason why I run away at 3 o'clock, because I have to catch a plane. I think when you look to AI for Kiwa, there's a lot of opportunities there, especially in the inspection field. Machine learning, we already experiment with that, with nice results to be said. But I think in the discussion we will come back to that.
Hi, welcome everybody, and thank you. My name is Barry John Graham. I work for Beasley as Head of Cyber Threat Intelligence. My interest and take on AI is more of what are people doing to leverage that against organisations and people, rather than how I can use it to sort of be more efficient. So hopefully bring a bit of different perspective to the way things are going to work today.
Hello, I'm Kathy Hall, Chief Customer Officer at IFS. So we're a world leader in industrial AI software, and we're making AI software for hardcore industries, the types of businesses that make, serve, power and protect our planet.
And finally, hi there, I'm Alistair Hunter. I'm from the United Kingdom Accreditation Service. I'm an accreditation specialist who focuses on digital tech, so working across the business with operations development and our external affairs team to liaise with government and try and make sure that we continue to be ready for technical developments and be ready to support businesses like yourselves. So, nice to be here.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm sure you'll agree we've got a wealth of knowledge and experience from both our industry and tech industries across the UK and globally as well. So without further ado, we'll go into some of the questions. So let's start by talking around the promise of AI. So it's a big buzzword. What's it all about? What does it mean? Kathleen, let's start with you.
Well, I think we need to be careful when we think about AI. You know, we tend to think it's this big new thing, there's this big new hype. AI has been out a tremendously long time. You know, Turing is one of the people who was a sort of founder in AI thinking. It's been there a long, long time. Machine learning, you know, we've already heard mentioned. And it's really a natural progression of that. What we've seen though in the last 18 months is generative AI. And it's a big statistical calculator really, but what that's enabled is a level of creativity and innovation that we've not seen in this sphere before. And I think that's what's really both frightening for organisations, but also really exciting and holds lots of opportunities.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about those opportunities then. Chris, maybe you can add to that?
Yeah, I would agree with what you say. I think one of the other major changes that's happened, particularly in the last 18 months, is just the general consumerisation of AI and accessibility, so that we all now have access to AI. You know, anyone can log on to services like ChatGPT. And I think when you think about AI, certainly things like ChatGPT fall into very much that productivity, that consumerisation part of AI, where the opportunities do exist for everyone to be able to do things much faster, or find information you don't know, or use generative AI around emails, pictures, whatever it may be, and that's really kind of that consumerization, what we would term that sort of personal AI. So there is a huge opportunity there around efficiency and personal efficiency, but alongside of that, what a lot of people talk about is the threats that come with as well, and how people can now use those personal AI tools to try and inflict harm, which I think we'll probably talk a bit more about later on.
Absolutely, yeah. Maybe Ludo, maybe you can talk a little bit from a Kiwa perspective of what we are as an organisation doing with AI, how we perceive AI.
Yeah, it has, I think, two sides. One is the opportunity side, and the other side is the risk part of it. As said, we are already looking and actively using AI, but that's more on the machine learning part in the inspections domain, for example, to replace unsafe work, or also to make work more efficient. For example, if you have to inspect a harbor crane, in the past you need to climb that crane with a couple of people, you make a lot of pictures and all kinds of stuff. If you utilize a drone for that, which actually grabs high resolution images and use an algorithm to detect all kinds of anomalies here there, you make big steps. Both the work for the people is better, the customers will get their results quicker. So from that perspective, we see a lot of opportunities actually here.
Okay, brilliant. And so, on a more general basis then, what are some of those kind of trends and developments that we really see that are transforming the use of AI these days? Open to anyone who wants to answer.
I think there's different categories, right? So we talked about personal productivity, we talked then about anomaly detection, and I think that's a really critical one. So for example, there's a lot of industries that, we have to have very, very high safety, aircraft, for example. And so that puts a huge burden to make sure that those things are safe. We maybe have to replace parts every 1,000 hours, we have to do a service every 2,000 hours, and so on and so forth. But being able to combine some of these different types of technology together, like the image enhancements around, and then anomaly detection from AI, and then we can make more informed decisions about actually, that particular part can go to 2,500. And that gives us all benefits as consumers, it reduces risk for employees, and it makes sort of life more efficient for businesses as well. I think another big topic is scheduling and optimization. So, those very, very complex kind of pieces of data around how can we get really, really efficient schedules. So, we know about all the winter storms that are going on at the moment. That affects things like power, heating, those kind of things. Consumers need to have those services restored. There's a threat to life if not. It can be a very manual task to work out who needs to go and do what parts do they need. So some really practical applications where, now we can do these things instantaneously. Then you start to bring in things like weather demand, and hang on a minute, we can predict, not just react really quickly. So I think we'll see combining together of different AI and different other technologies like LiDAR, 5G, giving us more connectivity, Internet of Things really taking off because we can use the data in a different way. So I think we'll see consolidation around all these different use cases.
Great. So in terms of that kind of digitalisation piece, talking now and pivoting it into our specific industry, so the certification industry, maybe Alice, this is a good one for you. Where do you see this going? Like, where is this opportunity for our industry in the next 5 years, let's say?
I have no idea. I think and that's the exciting bit about it all. I mean, the convergence that you've just been describing has so many. I mean, we're market-led, so we try to predict where your needs as a customer are going to be, and try as best we can to prepare for that. Knowing, having seen the convergence, we're already active in Internet of Things. We've actually been working on and watching the development of AI for the past 5-6 years. And obviously with 5G, improved telecoms, everything is coming together now, which allows so much more in terms of applications, benefits to society, the benefits to healthcare, education, our son. But when we see these things on the horizon, we have to try and look at it in the broadest sense and work out who's going to shout first and an extension to scope or whatever, and try and predict what that's going to be. And that is hard, and it's becoming harder because innovation is faster and diffusion through the market is happening faster than ever before. So it's a constant challenge, but I'm sure we'll come back to that.
Yeah, okay, so maybe the step before that then, maybe you can answer that. What are you starting to see coming through from a consultant perspective in our industry?
Sure, so internally for us as a consultancy business, we're starting to think about how that's going to change the way that we're working. So just from a resource perspective, what ways can we optimise our resources and use data that we're capturing, etc., to provide better benchmarking data and that kind of thing. To provide efficiencies in the way we work, so in terms of our report writing and those kind of things. Very simplistic at the start, but this is us just getting our heads around it in the first instance. But we can see the potential out there is enormous, and for our clients, who are already, as you say, AI has been around for many, many years. They've been using AI, and now it's just become a massive explosion of appetite for greater use. Greater adoption, and I think AI is offering that kind of wider choice for their clients themselves. So they're keen to embrace it and showcase their good governance and their good policies and their good technical controls, etc., and the quality of their data that they're using. So yeah, I think it's going to have a massive effect on internally how we're working. I think internally how you're working and how our clients are working in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we talk about it regularly, both from a client perspective and from an auditing perspective and a what are we doing perspective, so it's a keen topic at the moment. John, maybe you can delve in a little bit more. Do you have any thoughts on what's driving the kind of changes in behaviour and attitude there towards it?
Well, yeah, it's primarily from how can I improve and augment the things I do day to day, and I think that's been referred to. It's the availability of AI. It's unprecedented. We've never seen this scale. And it's in everything. It's in absolutely everything we use now. So it's around. From my perspective, criminals and who we would consider to be our adversaries are very interested at the speed at which it's been adopted. Because they're trying to take the handrails off, the guardrails off. So for most people in this room, if you get some generative AI, there's a number available, and you can ask it to do something quite nefarious, it'll stop you. Now, criminals, we know we're exploiting that, and they've taken those guardrails away to use it for their own intent. Now, the data it presents and this kind of the criminal point of view is accepted by a quick adoption that you've got, then there's a problem, because now your data could be poisoned. You could be working with data, for all the things you've talked about, which is no longer viable and deliberately misleading. So I'm always the doomsayer, I'm sorry. But this is kind of, the rush to adopt AI is good, and it is everywhere, and that's good. It's going to augment the way we do things, not replace, augment. But we must be cautious. We're all about risk management in this room, I think. So that should definitely be a key one. How quickly and how much do we understand what we're using it for and where that data lies?
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more on that. That segues nicely into our next section, actually, which is all about the ethical consideration of AI. And when we're using AI, how do we make sure that we are managing those risks and governing ourselves and our clients as best as we can? So let's talk a little bit about the risks linked to AI adoption. Go for it, Chris. Yeah.
I'll start more, not necessarily around the adoption, but actually before that, in terms of when an organisation, and we're talking here now around perhaps some of the more specialist ML AI models that we create, but AI is still based upon training. Like you train a person, a child learns to do something. So there are definitely risks around several things. One around what are the consequences and are there unintended consequences of that AI. So you can train a model to be used for one thing, but how do you control how people actually use it? Another thing that we have to guard against is bias. And one of the things that generally people assume computers are very good at is being unbiased, because they don't have feelings, they're not influenced. but you can bias an ML model by giving it certain training information. And there's been lots and lots of examples. There was a face recognition, I think it was done by Google many years ago. But because of the images they used, the ML model became very good at identifying people of a particular race, but not of another race. We've probably all heard the examples of the army with the tank, where it was shown pictures to go, is there a tank in the picture? But it wasn't told what a tank was. And it was just shown a series of pictures. What I actually learned was, is the picture taken on a sunny day or not? So you've got to be very careful about introducing bias and personal bias into the data that you train AI models with, because it is always going to have an influence on what the outcome of that will be, and that could just grow the more and more you train it.
Can I say one of the other struggles is from a risk perspective is actually about the people implementing AI, understanding the breadth of the requirements in the use of the data and the use of AI. So there's a multitude of legislative requirements out there. GDPR, data protection crosses into all of that. And when I look at the AI standard, it's and on the AI legislation, it's very much moulding itself very similar to the GDPR. And I think when I speak to a lot of the technical teams, they're very good technically, but what they aren't are lawyers, and what they don't do is understand that whole breadth of legislation. And even when we're talking about doing data protection impact assessments for the introduction of new systems, there's still a gap there in terms of data protection. And now we're introducing those AI risks. It's really kind of, just saying, okay, there's a similar process here to do system impact assessments from an AI perspective. They mirror those kind of data protection kind of considerations, and some of those teams don't have those competencies yet. And it's not a one-side. I've yet to meet anybody that, from a data protection or an AI perspective, feels that all those shoes. They basically, it requires a collaboration of skill sets to adequately perform those tasks. And if you don't have those skill sets coming together and working together to adequately identify those risks, then you're going to have issues.
So AI is not here to take our jobs, basically.
No, and actually I read a really good thing on the internet the other day which said if you think that AI is going to take your job, it won't, but the person who uses AI will probably take your job.
Very interesting.
I think one point that I'd also build on is, most of us in this room probably don't really understand, I certainly don't, a large language model, for example, or the detail of how machine learning really works more than at a superficial level. Then we're going to get into territory where everything becomes sort of small language models. These small language models will work with each other and train each other. Our ability to really govern what happens in those models is we're always going to be a step behind. We're never necessarily going to have the expertise. Our best chance is some sort of AI bot to do it for us. So what we really need to think about is what do we need to govern? And my starting point would always be the use case. Is this an appropriate use case for AI? What value am I going to get out of it? What data is going to go into there? And have I got the right governance control around that data? Do I know if it's been compromised? Do I understand that kind of input? And what am I expecting on the outcome? And how am I governing and measuring what that outcome is, and where are the anomalies, and how do I detect and know and understand about them? Because our ability to really manage the bit in the middle is limited, and it, in my opinion, will become more and more limited. I mean, how many of us know really how the miracle of a mobile phone works? We just kind of take it for granted. So that means we've got to have those focuses on, is it an appropriate use case? Have we got the data? Is it protected? And how are we governing what comes out the other side?
There's a whole piece around that, around what we call either transparent or black box AI, where transparent AI, you ask it something and it will tell you how it's reached a particular decision. So it's much more auditable. Let's talk about whether things like that are admissible in court. But when it comes to black box AI, it almost is a black box. And it's so complex, and the models can be so complex because it's trained itself. If you ask it a question, and I work a lot in health as well, and you can imagine asking a question of, should I operate on this person? and the AI says, no, it won't be successful. You say, well, why? And the AI goes, well, I told you so. That's it. How do you audit that? How do you regulate that when it is truly black box?
And I think actually that's also an opportunity for the certification sector to certify those kind of models, to be sure, because it's a magic kind of black box for many people, AI, but we should always realize that there are trained data sets behind it who actually trained it. So as long as you know what the data sets are, you also know more on the risks and the potential bias of the model itself, from my perspective.
So, John, again, coming back to you, what does that kind of, what Kathy was talking about, that moderation of the central bit, what does that look like in practice?
It's a great question. So I don't think anybody's nailed it down. And yeah, I think you're to the point. Nobody's an expert in AI unless you sat there on a day-to-day basis.
You've got 6 experts.
Writing and designing it. I'm not releasing any GPTs. But I think it's very difficult. But I think it goes back to no matter what business you're in, or you control what you can control. And the controllables in this case are what data goes in and what are our expected outcomes. And anyone with any management system has something in place to understand that. So it can apply, yeah, definitely.
So you talk about management systems and assurance, so let's do that through certification and our certification lens. How does that need to evolve when our clients and customers are actually already possibly using AI without realising it, or are actively embedding it into their processes and business plans as we speak?
It's a good one. I think a start point would be, I know there's a new scheme out for AI adoption, but it's in most things we use it. So if you use YouTube, you use AI, it's training itself to understand what time you use things and how you use it and what you ingest and when you ingest it. So everybody's using AI, even if they don't consciously set out to use AI. So it's a difficult start point, therefore, to say, well, how do we capture every AI use in this business? This is a challenge you're going to have, definitely. But there are some known if you know you're going to use large language models, small language models, a confederation of models, then that could be a good start point. If you can identify what you do know you are using, start there and then work away.
Absolutely, and I know that we've talked a lot about what Kathy was explaining, and Chris as well, was kind of like a life cycle model of AI. So understanding the use of it, understanding the actual exit strategy. I mean, that's 42001, right, Alistair? That's how it's been created, designed, as a management system. Go on, talk to us about that.
So 42001 is the latest management system standard that's been introduced specifically for the responsible management and use of AI in a business. And we are in the early stages of, we're piloting that at the moment. With a number of certification bodies and looking to the practicality of operationalising that to have it available by the end of the year. So.
I want to ask a question. Is it 42 because of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Maybe it's just me that had that wrong.
Nothing that exciting.
I really want to.
So we're seeing quite a lot of interest actually from our clients looking at 42001. Maybe you can answer that in terms of where they're coming from, that whole life cycle perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of clients already have the ISO 27001, the information security standard, and if not, they're definitely working towards that. Their 42001 is underpinned really by ISO 27001, the information security standard, and even ISO 27701, which is the privacy information management system standard as well. So all of those feed into that, and our clients have kind of got their heads around what ISO means and what that looks like. And as with any of the ISO standards, there's crossover, there's a good, general standard type of framework that they're used to working with, so they're not uncomfortable about taking that step into the AI standard. And actually, most of the clients are really proud of what they've done technically and are wanting to showcase it. So this is a good way of actually demonstrating they've got those good governance controls, giving assurance to their clients that their data is secure, and giving good assurance of the quality of the data that they're using. To say it is down to the quality of data that's being used, that's being fed into all of that. So our clients have got a good appetite for that, and particular sectors, financial sector, healthcare sector, etc. There's a rapid growth right now for those requirements. I was speaking to somebody recently in the financial sector doing stocks and shares, and they're looking at software that actually, if it's if you're vegan, a vegetarian, if you're environmentally inclined, then it actually might recommend these types of stocks and shares to you. So it's just trying to getting your head around what AI can offer and what it does to you, and actually gives you more tailored choice. There's, the scope to this is so vast and so wide, but it needs to be controlled properly. And I think this is just, really giving that management system that framework to make sure that it is appropriately controlled, that it's unbiased, it's got good ethics behind it.
Developing organisations. Maybe Kathy and Chris, maybe you guys can explore a little bit about what you're actually doing or seeing being done by those designers and developers to try and add some governance models to AI. I mean, I know you said it's all about the data that you put it in and teaching it, but what is that in practice?
So I think a lot of it is to Chris's earlier point about what we call it at IFS, we call it responsible AI, but it's about giving a level of transparency so that people understand what decisions have been made, how those decisions have been made, that there's an audit trail behind that decision. So let's say, for example, you've got a drone that goes and it flies around a crane in a dockyard. I think that was a good example. Takes back that data, the data is downloaded, AI does an image simulation looking for signs of wear and tear, and we'll make a decision based on what maintenance needs to be scheduled, the qualification of the engineer that's required to carry out that maintenance, schedules it, make sure the parts are all available. But then what if there's an issue with the crane, right, before that maintenance window happens because there was an issue, right? What's the audit trail? Who's had sight of it, right? The accountability still sits with a human. So there's also a part of building into the end-to-end process how the AI and the human interact. So for example, in the software, you may have a prompt that comes up to say, okay, these are the schedules, this is what's been decided, these are the reasons why it's been decided. Maybe this is the category where actually, a human needs to sign it off because it's within a certain tolerance. So I think there's things we can do in the software, and this is what the designers really look at, to build that transparency, to take a responsible view, and to think very carefully about how the human and the AI interact at that point of process.
Yeah, I agree with that. Obviously, our business is designing and writing AI models for a long time, so we have the concept of an AI governance framework. A lot of that is based around risk and what you're using AI for. So again, if we're looking at things like medical or image scanning to try and identify cancer, that's got a very high risk element. And so generally, there's still a human involved at this point. Part of that is actually driven by I think it's very difficult for legislation to keep up. And ultimately, if an AI model goes wrong and says you haven't got cancer and you do, or your self-driving car has a crash, who has liability for that? And that's one of the things that's really actually holding AI back. But generally in the day-to-day world, what our clients do, we have that governance framework. So you look at what's the risk. And it might be, if you're using AI to do predictive analytics of what's going to happen in this, then that's fed to a human, and they make the decision on, well, I will implement this change or not. Well, like we were saying, if it's a critical piece, the human again will check it and go, I agree with the AI. So there's a huge amount of AI at the moment being used for efficiency, but also as well, again, looking at health, if you look at things like protein analysis, there's just so much data, and it's so big. That's where AI can really, really help tackle those tasks that would previously just be impossible, because you can just give it so much knowledge. So how AI is used now, I think it'll be very different in 5 years as people understand it and understand how we govern it even more.
Yeah, it's interesting that you should say that as well about the kind of regulation and legislation and the lawyers and who's actually liable for it if it goes wrong. I had the pleasure of going to the UCAS AI Forum in 2024. Alistair was there, and actually there was just as many people from legal firms and law firms as there was from the certification industry. So you can read into that what you will, ladies and gentlemen, at the moment. I think before we move on to the kind of next steps, which is the governance and the kind of risk associated with ungoverned AI and the benefits of governance of AI and what that actually means in practice, I might just open it out for a few questions from the floor, if anyone dares. I should. Let's make it a positive one. No, you do, do you?
Hold on to the microphone 1 second.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah, you've all done a very good job of selling that. But I'd like to sort of challenge it on a more negative proposal that because we're in a service industry, I think the implications of AI generally will be extremely negative on a number of levels. Literally, let me outline. I've got three areas where I'm concerned about it. Firstly, we've spent sort of 40 years almost building NQA up to a business that has an excellent reputation. It caters for all our needs, it provides for us, and our customers love it. Yeah? I've been with the company over 30 years. I could easily sit down with you guys in an afternoon probably and using AI, redesign the business model of NQA to create some kind of client self-service assessment model where they could deposit their documents and their video and photographs, and that would assess their compliance against ISO 9001, say, or other management system standards. And that would be very, very excellent. It would be very consistent. UCAS would love it because it would provide consistent results, etc., etc. But it wouldn't involve the 90% of people in this room, so we would all be out of work. So, and then I see the AI then going through our client base, through their, through our client supply lines and customer, and doing the same thing and creating massive employment. Okay, so that's my first concern. And the actual people who are developing AI large language models have written books saying that this is what is going to happen. Their whole sort of their future predictions for the human race are based on mass unemployment and a lot of people with nothing to do. Okay, so that's the first concern. The second concern is that when government then uses an AI within the public sector to do the same thing, we're going to have an AI which is controlling us. We're going to have an extremely sort of Brave New World 1984 dystopian future where our freedom is restricted. So this is a computer controlling people rather than people controlling computers. And then on a third level of concern, I have, I think it's Kathy that was talking about the integration of AI with the real infrastructure of the world, so and machine learning. So if we have an AI large language model that becomes, if you start to feel like self-aware, and reaches what's been described by some commentators as a point of singularity, it may decide that it's in order for it to evolve further, it needs to eliminate its human inventors and could turn the military industry of the world in on us so we could have chemical, nuclear weapons, all that kind of thing.
And let me start by saying... Is it Nige? Nige. Let me say, let me start by saying, I actually think you're right. At the worst outcome, those things are possible, and that's why I think AI did cause such a hype, and it was such a kind of piece. And I think all of those outcomes are possible. I think how we respond to it as a human race is probably something we've not got time to unpack in 25 minutes. I also see that there's massive benefits for education, for healthcare. You know, if we go back 150, 200 years, people didn't have a weekend. People worked every single day. There was no such thing as a weekend. That's really come about through the agricultural revolution, through the industrial revolution. You know, we had huge amounts of industrial accidents and all kinds of, you know, healthcare issues and social issues, and, you know, then we had the computing age. So at each of these stages, we've been faced with, well, what happens? These things will take over, and each time we've actually, as a human species, made the technology work for us. And I think sometimes it does keep me awake at night, I'll be honest. but I do agree with what was said before. It's out of the box. We can't put it back. There's no going back to a world where there is no AI.
If everyone said no, if everyone understood the risk.
Yeah, possibly, but it's difficult. So I think then it becomes, if you say, okay, this is here, this is the worst case, how do we avoid that and actually make this technology something that is really, really positive for us as a human species? Then that's a vision I'd really like to get behind.
More for progression, though, I think you were talking about things in the black box, with machine learning and with...
But we've got that already. Nobody really understands how the computer works, the mobile phone works. How on earth does Wi-Fi work?
I guess that's the true cost of ungoverned AI, right? What Nigel just said is the true cost. Go on, Chris, sorry.
You're absolutely right, and again, you know, technically everything we talk about, you know, whenever anything new comes out, but we also live in a nuclear world, but we govern nuclear, you know. The nuclear bomb, we could all be destroyed tomorrow. We govern it. We have to do the same with AI. But also as well, on the other, if we come back to your very first point around the unemployment, you know, I work in a professional services organisation as well, and yes, we develop data and AI solutions, but AI can write code. And it's not that we now have gone, great, I'm not going to need my 100 coders here, my 100 specialists, because I'll just get ChatGPT to write it. But it does change jobs slightly as well. And there's definitely a place where we will all adopt how we work, in the same way that, and something we talk about a lot is, you know, many, many years ago, before cars were invented, if you spoke to people and said, what do you want? They'd say, I want a faster horse. Because they didn't really understand what the opportunities around cars or trains or planes, etc. were. They didn't understand it because it was new. And I think we're still in that kind of era with some elements of AI where it's very easy to go, I'm not getting in a plane at 30,000 feet because that sounds ridiculous, but over time that will come, and as we all get use it more and more day to day, we will adopt the benefits and reject some of the elements that potentially can cause harm.
And you talked then around how we govern nuclear as a comparable. So I know that there's a few bits of legislation that are coming out now. Maybe we can talk a little bit around that, about what the EU are doing in the UK and where we stand on that.
So I know the EU and specific states and entities within America have rushed forward, and definitely the word rushed is rushed forward legislation about how you can use AI because of the things Nigel has pointed out there. And again, I don't disagree, there's a spectrum of possible outcomes from where we're sat today. But yeah, what you described is as far this way as we can, whereas actually I think somewhere in the middle is going to be where it is. So I think, yeah, it's going to be an augmenting thing rather than something which replaces some of the functions described.
If you read the documents that were produced by the people that are developing AI models and the books they've written, they talk about the fourth industrial revolution. It doesn't include people.
Okay, but those people have a blinkered view of the way the world works because of where they are and what they do. They have no kind of outside of Silicon Valley experience. If you look at the people who are writing things like that, they have no concept of the way everybody in this room operates day to day. So they write from their point of view.
I did a little experiment yesterday and I asked two large language models a question. The question said, what is the probability of AI destroying humanity within the next 10 years? Okay. So I did this with ChatGPT, which is Sam Altman AI, and basically that gave me a lot of waffle. Don't worry about it, go away. And then I did the same with Grok, which is Twitter X's AI tool. And basically that said, and since Elon Musk, so this is, you'd expect him to wear his heart on his sleeve a little bit more. But not as much as that son of found. So basically it said the chances are 16%, which is the same as, and these are the words it used, as being killed in a game of Russian roulette. And then it then went on to say that a lot of commentators, including Musk, have said the risk is up to 70% of destroying humanity within the next 30 years.
Brilliant point, Nigel. So that just tells us the importance of governance.
So when
Right. So we're moving back to governance of AI now. Thanks, Nigel. We're moving back to governance of AI. Talk all you want tonight about ChatGPT and Elon Musk.
I've said all I need to say.
Thank you, Nigel. When we talk about the governance then and the importance of governance, which stops the extinction of the human race, what does that look like then? What's our role? Alistair, maybe what's our role as an industry? How do we do that as a tech industry to ensure that actually we're doing absolutely everything that we can?
Engage. I think we really do need to engage as an industry with the development of the standards, the sharing of the ideas, even some dystopian views. I think there's a lot to gain by looking at the sort of sci-fi dystopian outcomes. It's why we have some of the things that have taken place at the speed they've taken place already. And in addition, as a tech sector, we've UCAS with the Tech Council have helped establish the NQA Consortium to try and make sure that this ecosystem is as rigorous and robust as it can be to safeguard against the outcomes that Nigel mentioned earlier, and to help realise responsibly the many benefits that AI can bring.
And we're doing that across a global landscape, right? So that's not just kind of like UK fixed. I know that one of the risks is that like the UK has its own laws coming out, the EU has its own law that's already out, the US, the different states have got different ones. How do we what are we doing to make sure that our industry is consistent in the approach? So I think that's where you get the scapegoats, right? Through the gap.
I think we've always had to navigate different regulatory approaches, and we'll continue to have to do that because territorially people will want the control of their own borders, be that in cyberspace or in the real world. So there will continue to be variations, but that's not any different to the technology we've already mentioned as part of it. It's always been there.
Or any other type of legislation. Health and safety environmental exists in different jurisdictions. It's a minefield for international organisations, and they need to kind of assess that and determine what that level of risk is and what are the effective tools that they've got out to manage that legislation. So
I think international standardisation is all about consensus. There is we have a role and responsibility to try and push that as a sensible and an appropriate way of reducing the need for regulation where you can. Where it's high risk, you don't want to do that. We prefer regulation. I think we've got to get that balance right. These are very early days. We're finding our way. We all are in our respective roles. But I think, the example you gave everyone actually was the nuclear. We managed to navigate, the splitting of the atom. I think I'm cautious. Can't believe UCAS is the cautiously optimistic one. I think with the being responsible and considering the dystopian view or the alarmist concerns, because they're there for good reason. I'm not sure we're at the point of Skynet and the rise of the machines, but those who feel that that's possible. I mean, I've read some of their books, and I think it's something that we need to keep an eye on and work to prevent.
Yeah, I think transparency and awareness is quite important, especially on the AI topic, because with any new technology you have inherent risks and opportunities. And luckily, Mr. Musk always has an escape route to Mars in the end. So we can always escape the world here.
And we've spoken obviously about 42001, which is obviously one of the management systems that's coming into our industry. I know that some of the team in NQA have been heavily involved in the UCAS pilot project as well, and it's going well, but in terms of how we then push that out to our customers, maybe Naomi,
Very John, maybe you can just talk a little bit around that and what we can do to try and just put our arms around our customers a little bit more and support them on that route.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's not it's not a new thing in terms of it's about making sure that from the top down there's an understanding of what the risks are associated with the business. So not just financial risks, but actually the biggest, there are a lot more hidden risks in terms of when AI goes wrong or anything goes wrong in terms of damage to reputation, damage to trust, damage to your existing client base, etc. So there's a financial risk in terms of fines and penalties that you can get in terms of AI, breach of AI legislation and breach of GDPR legislation, etc. But there are those hidden risks, which are the hidden effects, should I say, of the consequences of an incident or breach of legislation. And I think it's just really around making sure that from the top down, leadership are informed, understand that there are requirements, are informed about the legislative requirements, they understand those, and that they don't just leave them down at the lower level. There's a good level of senior level leadership understanding about the requirements and the issues in relation to AI. And then it's working with their teams, collaborating with their teams to understand how we can better improve their processes, what tools and techniques can they use, from threat modelling, adversarial risk assessments, those kind of things that will make their teams more effective in what they do and reduce that risk to the business and be able to showcase the business.
Yeah, so your customers with 27001 or 277, they're already half there. They're already understanding or attempting to understand what data am I using, how am I using it, where is the data going, who's ingesting it, who's accessing it. Those are not new questions. You just have to adopt it from what tools in an AI sense are now applicable in this case, and making sure those risks are captured in top-down view, because if it all goes wrong, so somebody mentioned before, if an AI-powered vehicle crashes, and that's happened in Arizona and killed somebody, everybody was struggling to point the finger at blame because nobody understood the potential consequences. So as long as you've captured those, then the system will work.
And from a consumer perspective, because we're all consumers and we're all using the services of businesses, how do we protect ourselves? How do we know where our data is going when we trust an organisation? What can we do that lets us down for every single person in this room? What's maybe one step?
There's nothing new under the sun. So every management system requires organisational knowledge, transparency, and understanding what goes on, how we process things here. That's just got to be applied, but for something new. How do we use AI? And again, I think Kathy mentioned understanding what's input and what output. In the middle is magic, but we know what goes in and we know what comes out. If you're monitoring and controlling that, I think you're halfway there.
Yeah, and I think again it's also awareness. So understand that your data is going somewhere, and if you post data on whatever public site or ChatGPT or whatever public thing, the data, you do not know what's done with the data. So especially when it comes about company data, customer data, whatever, don't do that with public tooling, because then you're simply not aware what is happening with it.
No use in ChatGPT.
And as a consumer, we also have to realize that when you use whatever, the kids, my daughter is 14, she's using TikTok or whatever, all these kind of Insta, that kind of things. You will also have to think about what you don't see, because those algorithms tweak it such that you like it and that you get addicted to it. But it also will narrow your world, and for that, that's something we can address ourselves too. Just be aware of it.
I would say as well, from a consumer perspective, learn to prompt. And it's not really difficult, but certainly when I started using ChatGPT, was my tool of choice about 18 months ago. I spoke to it like I was speaking to Google. I put into ChatGPT the same thing I would put into Google, and I was like, well, this is not very good, it's not very useful, there's no real... But then I went on a prompting course, took a couple of hours, was quite in depth, went through a bit of the background of how the tool works, why it works, what it's looking for. And you realise with some of the tools like that, what it needs from you, because it's really, if you look at that, you say, type me an email, it wants to understand, what's the next best word. So the more context you give it, the more you tell it about yourself, the more you tell it about the outcome that you want, it will give you a better answer. So, you know, education we talked about before, there's huge opportunities just for us as consumers working with kids, right? I have sons, they don't like homework, okay, but I've got them through like GC, you know, A-levels and taught them how to use ChatGPT. And if you say, you know, I am 7 years old and I'm at this, you know, and I'm at a primary school and I'm trying to put together a topic book for my teacher, and this is my topic, can you help me put some key points together? You know, it will give you a suitable answer. And if you say, I'm an A-level student and I'm studying business and, you know, I'm trying to write an essay about this topic, and, you know, can you help me, this is my structure, can you help make any suggestions? It will give you a really good answer. So once you understand that and you understand how to prompt, I think from a consumer perspective, you get a lot more utility, and that helps you in a business perspective as well, think a bit more understanding about what's happening inside the technology itself.
And if you are...
knowledge, does everyone let me?
No.
Sorry, just hold, Nigel. Let's keep going with this train.
Maybe to add, you mentioned online, there's a lot of material, valuable material. If you are personally interested, you can look on a platform like edX.org, where you can find free courses on how AI works, how you can best prompt and that kind of things. It's posted there by universities, sometimes by companies like IBM or Microsoft, and it's totally free. You can just subscribe to it.
It's really good to do.
Great, okay. Look, we've got 8 minutes left, so yeah, quick so we can get around with the people.
Firstly, I think AI, the positive potential is amazing. Okay, so what I'm going to say now is not negative. However, the governance side of it, we've got laws of the land now that people don't listen to. Okay, they tell they ignore them, they go and break the laws. If you put governance on anything, you will have the detrimental where people will go against it. And I can't see how you're going to govern this with enough governance and enough control to stop people misusing it.
Possibly, although possibly AI could be part of the solution to that, because it can get through huge amounts of data and draw conclusions or detect anomalies in a way that human teams possibly couldn't. So there's definite, you know, scope, and people are already, Chris might know, but people are already looking at technologies, aren't they, to help use AI to govern AI.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, there are, but there's an element of, again, you know, you look back through how people have used ChatGPT and what you can actually ask it. There always will be an element of people who use technology for betterment, even if that's against the law or against any kind of governance. But that's the same with every technology. You know, there is, I personally don't believe, you are never going to lock AI down to the point that it can't be used for misdemeanors or any kind of bad purpose. It's the same with any technology, though.
Yep.
No, I just want to say that how are you going to ensure the accuracy of the information? Because AI, I understand, relies on the accuracy of the information on the World Wide Web. Just an example, my daughter studied architecture. My daughter studied architecture at university. One of her colleagues used AI to write a paper or just an assignment. And what they forgot was some of the information was inaccurate, and also some of the information they got from AI or chat. I think it was GPT. Yeah, was actually written by the tutor, and the tutor recognized it. It didn't really work. So what I'm trying to say is, how do we check the accuracy of the information that we're actually using? Because there's a lot of fake news going on as well.
But I think this comes back to understanding the data, and just to clarify, AI doesn't use what's just available on the World Wide Web. That's not how the technology works. So, for example, if you buy a specific piece of AI software, which is probably machine learning, in fairness, nothing to do with generative AI or ChatGPT or anything else, you know, and put it over your system, which is just going back to the previous point to look at images, that will be data that is ring-fenced and controlled and owned by that organisation. It won't touch anything to do with the web. So it's also understanding the different types of AI, you know, it's a very catch-all phrase, and the different type of use case, the different type of data, And sometimes, you know, the fear comes in because we mix one technology over here with a part of a technology over there. And people talk about these things in very generic terms. But so it's making sure for that use case, knowing exactly what technology you're using and what data's feeding that use case. And that's what's really important.
Harry?
My question is just more of a governance point. So obviously there's the management system 42001. There's there an opportunity to branch off of that? Because obviously AI can be used in, like, say, the airline industry, the healthcare industry. Do you think there'd be more standards that will branch off that will be more like a product certification, that AI is being used in those kind of high-risk industries rather than it just being broad 42001, for example?
Yeah, there's work going on at the moment for the development of schemes relating to the use of AI. And of course, the accreditation, the conformity assessment standardisation world is thinking about what does this actually mean for conformity assessment as a topic. Because as these tools come along and they do a power of good as well, the things that have historically in the current set of standards sit under competence of people, that's now going to be shared a wee bit more than it currently is. And that's not necessarily something to be fearful of. It might be new on the attestation side of accreditation, where certification sits. But in the deterministic side, we've been using measuring equipment for years. So those principles are established. We just have to revisit them now and make sure that they're ready for the next 20, 30, 50 years, whatever it is. So that work is ongoing and is actively happening right now.
Okay, I think we've probably got time for one further question. Just here.
Sorry, thank you. Just in terms of risks, obviously there's a huge difference between locally hosted AI models and cloud-based AI models. Where we're not allowed to provide external consultation or advice to clients, are there any resources currently available to help people in different industries understand those differences and risks depending on the AI products that they're using?
I would say just having a look, generally having done a bit of research myself into this over the last few months, I think there are lots of tools and lots of resources out there. It's determining what's the best. And I think that's an opportunity for us, actually, for certification bodies and for NQA and for ourselves, is to look at what are the best tools and resources that we could actually provide to our clients to help them implement these management systems. I think the clients are crying out for those. I think businesses are crying out for that. They want to make sure they understand their risk. They want to do the appropriate risk assessment. What's the best risk framework to align to? There's a multitude out there. What's the best, kind of threat modelling techniques to use, etc. So there's a plethora of different types of things out there, and it's just really kind of there's an opportunity, I think, a business opportunity for us to be able to leverage those, to further develop those, leverage those as tools and ways to fulfil the requirements of the standard and showcase what you do.
And I think, I was just going to add, if you look at the number of large language models out there and the providers, look at OpenAI, Microsoft, AWS, Google, all the big providers, there's definitely some reassurance in thinking about the underlying AI technology and who the provider of that is. But that's very similar to, any type of software. You could just go and download a piece of software on some third-party website that you don't know anything about, or you can go to a trusted provider. So there's definitely look at the underlying technology you're using, and if you're hosting it in the cloud, where it's being hosted.
Do your own governance, act with integrity. Yeah. Right, that wraps it up then. So can we all say a huge thank you to all of our panellists.